My name is Sarah Beth Williams, and I'm 28 years old. I work as a marketing coordinator at Blue Ridge Consulting, a mid-sized business firm here in Abingdon, Virginia. For the past 2 years, my life had been consumed by one person, Catherine Kate Henderson, the new senior marketing director who seemed determined to make my professional existence absolutely miserable. Kate arrived at Blue Ridge Consulting like a corporate tornado. Fresh from a prestigious firm up in Richmond, she was everything I wasn't: polished, confident, and apparently untouchable in the eyes of upper management. Within her first month, she'd reorganized our entire department, implemented new systems that made my job twice as hard, and somehow convinced the partners that her way was the only way forward for our little firm tucked away in the Blue Ridge Mountains. But it wasn't just her professional dominance that bothered me. It was the way she seemed to single me out specifically for criticism and impossible standards. Every project I worked on, she'd find flaws that nobody else could see. Every presentation I gave, she'd ask pointed questions that made me look unprepared in front of clients. During team meetings, she'd interrupt me mid-sentence or redirect conversations away from my ideas like I was some first-year intern instead of someone who'd been with the company for 3 solid years. My colleagues, people like Jimmy Patterson and Melissa Crawford, who'd been my friends since I started, began avoiding me, clearly afraid that associating with Kate's apparent target would hurt their own careers. Even Tommy Burke, who'd always been quick with a joke to lighten the mood, started giving me sympathetic looks instead of his usual friendly banter. The breaking point came during the Mountain View Resort pitch. I'd spent weeks developing a comprehensive marketing strategy for their new conference center expansion. It was innovative, cost-effective, and perfectly tailored to attract both corporate retreats and wedding parties to our beautiful corner of Southwest Virginia. I was proud of it, probably the best work I'd done in my 3 years at Blue Ridge Consulting. The morning of the presentation, Kate called me into her office. She sat behind her massive oak desk, her expression unreadable as she flipped through my proposal with the kind of precision that made my stomach churn. "Sarah Beth," she said without looking up, "I'm making some changes to your presentation." My heart sank like a stone. What kind of changes? She finally met my eyes, and I saw something cold there, something that reminded me of the ice storms that sometimes hit our mountains in January. "I'm removing the social media component entirely. It's too risky for a client like Mountain View. Traditional approaches work better for established hospitality businesses in rural markets." I felt my face flush hot. The social media strategy was the centerpiece of my entire proposal, designed specifically to help Mountain View reach younger demographics who might not know about the beauty of our area. "Kate, with respect, that strategy is what makes this proposal unique. Without it, we're just offering them the same generic package every other consulting firm from here to Bristol is pitching." "Sarah Beth," she said, her voice sharp as broken glass, "I've been doing this for 8 years. You've been here for 3. Trust me when I say I know what works in this market." I wanted to argue, to fight for my idea, to explain that I'd grown up in these mountains and understood the local market better than someone who'd moved here from Richmond. But the look in her eyes told me it would be career suicide. I nodded, gathered my materials, and spent the next 4 hours gutting my own presentation like cleaning a fish. The pitch was a complete disaster. Mountain View's management team looked bored throughout my sanitized presentation. When their marketing director, a young woman about my age, asked about digital marketing strategies for reaching millennial and Gen Z travelers, I had to admit we hadn't included any comprehensive social media plans. We lost the account to a smaller firm from Johnson City that offered exactly what I'd originally proposed. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot behind Blue Ridge Consulting and cried. Not just from professional frustration, but from the crushing realization that Kate Henderson was going to destroy my career, and there wasn't a blessed thing I could do about it. The worst part was that I loved this job, loved working with local businesses, loved being part of a community where my work actually mattered to real people I'd grown up with. What I didn't know was that my personal life was about to implode in a way that would make work drama seem like a minor inconvenience. 3 weeks after the Mountain View disaster, I was reviewing campaign analytics for the Holston Valley Credit Union account when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my daddy's number, but it was my younger brother Jake's voice that came through, shaky and scared in a way I'd never heard before. "Sarah Beth, you need to come to Johnston Memorial Hospital right now. Mama collapsed at the elementary school. They think it's her heart." The world stopped spinning. My mother, Mary Sue Williams, had been the strongest person I knew my entire life. At 53, she worked as a teacher's aide at Abingdon Elementary during the day and cleaned offices downtown at night to help support our family after Daddy's back injury ended his career at the coal mine. The idea of her lying helpless in a hospital bed was simply incomprehensible to my mind. I grabbed my keys and raced to the hospital, my Honda Civic flying down the familiar roads I'd traveled my whole life, my mind spinning with worst-case scenarios. When I arrived at the cardiac ICU, I found Daddy in his wheelchair beside Mama's bed, holding her hand while tears streamed down his weathered face. Jake sat in the corner trying to comfort our 16-year-old sister Emma, who looked lost and terrified in a way that broke my heart. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Rebecca Foster who'd actually graduated from Abingdon High School a few years before me, explained that Mama had suffered a massive heart attack while helping set up for the school's fall festival. She needed emergency surgery, a triple bypass, followed by weeks of recovery and rehabilitation. The surgery alone would cost $180,000, not including the extended hospital stay, cardiac rehabilitation, and ongoing medication costs. "Do you have insurance?" Dr. Foster asked gently, though I could see in her eyes that she already knew the answer wouldn't be good. Daddy's face crumpled like old paper. "Basic coverage through the school district. It'll cover maybe 60% if we're lucky." I did the math in my head, and the numbers made me feel sick. We'd still owe over $70,000, plus ongoing medical expenses that could easily reach another $20,000 or more. Our family had been living paycheck to paycheck for years since Daddy's accident. His disability payments barely covered rent and utilities on our little house on Valley Street. Jake was still in college at ETSU, working part-time at Food City to help with expenses. Emma was in high school, focused on her studies and dreaming of being the first in our family to go to a 4-year college on a full scholarship. I was the only one with a decent income, but my marketing coordinator's salary of $38,000 a year wouldn't come close to covering a debt like that. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. I spent that night making phone calls, trying to understand our options and fighting back panic. The hospital's financial counselor, a patient woman named Betty Lou Chambers, was sympathetic but realistic. We could set up a payment plan, but even the minimum monthly payments would be more than our family's entire monthly income. She mentioned charity care applications and medical debt forgiveness programs, but warned me that the process could take months and wasn't guaranteed. I barely slept that night, lying in my childhood bed in the house where I'd grown up, staring at the ceiling and listening to the familiar sounds of our neighborhood. Between worrying about Mama's surgery and panicking about the financial catastrophe ahead, my mind wouldn't quiet. I kept thinking about second mortgages, personal loans, and bankruptcy. None of the scenarios ended well for our family. The surgery took 6 grueling hours. Dr. Foster emerged looking exhausted but relieved, still wearing her surgical scrubs and that tired smile doctors get when they've just saved someone's life. The procedure had gone well, Mama's heart was strong, and the bypasses were successful. She'd need several days in the ICU, followed by a longer hospital stay, but she was going to recover completely. Relief flooded through me like cool water, immediately followed by the crushing weight of the financial reality. We'd saved Mama's life, but we'd also committed our family to years of crippling debt that could force us to lose our home and destroy any chance Emma had of going to college. Over the next week, I practically lived at Johnston Memorial. I'd work from my laptop in the family waiting area during the day, then spend evenings sitting beside Mama's bed as she slowly regained strength. The medical bills had already started arriving in our mailbox at home: diagnostic tests, surgical fees, anesthesia charges, room and board costs. Each envelope felt like another stone added to a growing mountain of debt that threatened to bury our entire family. It was during one of these evening visits that everything changed in the most unexpected way imaginable. I was dozing in the uncomfortable hospital chair when I heard voices in the hallway outside Mama's room. One of them sounded familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. I looked up and froze like a deer in headlights. Kate Henderson was standing at the nurse's station, speaking quietly with Nancy Phillips, the floor supervisor who'd been working at Johnston Memorial since before I was born. Kate was dressed casually, jeans and a UVA sweater, looking more human than I'd ever seen her at work. But what in the world was she doing here? My first thought was pure paranoia. Had she somehow found out about my personal situation and come to use it against me? Was she planning to tell the partners at Blue Ridge that my family crisis was affecting my work performance? Maybe she was here to document that I was using company time and resources for personal matters. I ducked my head, hoping she wouldn't see me through the glass wall of Mama's room, but it was too late. She turned and our eyes met directly. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, to my complete shock and confusion, she walked over to the room. "Sarah Beth," she said softly, knocking gently on the doorframe. "May I come in?" I was too stunned to refuse. She entered quietly, her eyes moving from my sleeping mother to the monitors and medical equipment surrounding the bed. The beeping of the heart monitor filled the silence between us. "How is she?" Kate asked, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before, genuine concern that seemed to come from someplace deep and personal. "Better," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "The surgery went well. She just needs time to heal." Kate nodded, then did something that completely shattered my understanding of who she was as a person. She sat down in the chair across from me and said, "Sarah Beth, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Can you do that for me?" I stared at her, confused and wary, but nodded. 3 years ago, she began, her voice steady but soft. My younger brother Michael was in a terrible car accident on I-81, just outside of Bristol. Massive head trauma, broken ribs, internal bleeding, a punctured lung. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, and we didn't know if he'd ever wake up, much less be the same person he was before. Her voice was steady, but I could see pain in her eyes that looked old and deep. The medical bills were astronomical. Our family didn't have the kind of money needed for that level of care. We were facing bankruptcy, possibly losing our family farm that had been in the Henderson family for 4 generations. I waited, unsure where this was going, but sensing that something important was happening. During that time, I was working at my previous firm in Richmond, completely distracted and falling behind on everything that mattered. My supervisor was understanding at first, but after a few weeks, she started making comments about my commitment to the job. She began undermining my projects, questioning my decisions in front of clients, and making my work life absolutely miserable. My stomach started to sink as I began to understand where this story might be heading. One day, she called me into her office and told me I needed to get my priorities straight. She said if I couldn't handle my personal problems without affecting my work, maybe I wasn't management material after all. That same day, she removed me from a major client presentation I'd been preparing for months, a presentation that could have made my career. Kate's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and I noticed they were shaking slightly. I realized later that she wasn't trying to hurt me personally. She was trying to protect the company, to push me to be stronger, to force me to develop the resilience I'd need to succeed in leadership. At the time, it felt like cruelty. Now I understand it was preparation, even if it was poorly executed. The pieces were clicking into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. "Sarah Beth," Kate continued, meeting my eyes directly, "you're incredibly talented. Your work on the Mountain View proposal was brilliant. The social media strategy was innovative and exactly what they needed to reach new markets. But you're also too comfortable, too used to praise and easy victories. In this industry, especially in a small market like ours, you're going to face much worse than difficult bosses. You'll have clients who hate your ideas for no good reason, colleagues who steal your credit, and superiors who seem impossible to please no matter what you do." I felt heat rising in my cheeks. "So you decided to be all of those things to me?" "I decided to be your training ground," she said quietly, "because I saw potential in you that you don't even see in yourself yet. And because I wanted you to be ready for the real challenges ahead, the ones that could actually destroy your career if you're not prepared." I stared at her, anger and confusion warring in my chest like a summer thunderstorm. "You made my life miserable for 2 years because you thought it would help me? I made your professional life challenging because I wanted your career to survive contact with actually terrible people," she said. "The business world is full of people who will try to break you down, and I wanted you to develop the strength to fight back before you encountered them." She paused, then added more softly, "I never intended for it to overlap with genuine personal crisis. That was never part of the plan." The anger was winning out over confusion. "You don't get to make that choice for me, Kate. You don't get to decide that torturing me professionally is somehow for my own good. That's not how mentorship works." "You're absolutely right," she said simply, without defensiveness. "I don't. And I'm deeply sorry for the way I went about it." I wasn't ready to accept her apology. "Why are you telling me this now? Why are you here?" Kate was quiet for a long moment, looking at my mother's sleeping form and the medical equipment keeping track of her vital signs. "Because 2 days ago, I received a call from Johnston Memorial's billing department. They said the Williams family's account had some irregularities and they needed to speak with the person who'd made the payment arrangements." My blood went cold as winter ice. "What payment arrangements?" "I haven't made any payment arrangements yet." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. Sarah Beth, your mother's medical bills have been paid in full. The surgery, the hospital stay, the rehabilitation costs, the medications, everything. I snatched the folder from her hands, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the beeping monitors. Inside were receipts and payment confirmations, all showing zero balances. At the bottom was a single check stub for $78,247.63, signed by Catherine M. Henderson. The world tilted sideways. I looked up at her, unable to form words, feeling like I was drowning in confusion. My brother recovered completely, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. He's a physical therapist now, married to his college sweetheart, with twin daughters who just turned 3. The medical bills that almost destroyed our family were eventually paid off through a combination of fundraising, payment plans, help from our church, and an emergency assistance program through my employer. It took 3 years and nearly cost us the farm, but we managed. I was still staring at the receipts, trying to process what I was seeing. The numbers seemed impossible, like something from a dream. When I got the call from the hospital, I realized what was happening to your family. I know what that level of debt does to people, Sarah Beth. I watched my parents age 10 years and 3 months. I saw my mother stop buying groceries so they could make the minimum payments on Michael's medical bills. I watched my father consider selling land that had been in our family since before the Civil War. I couldn't let that happen to another family if I had the power to prevent it. But why? I whispered, my voice barely audible. After everything you put me through, why would you help me? Kate smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it reached her eyes and looked genuine. Because despite 2 years of my worst professional behavior, you never gave up. You never stopped trying to do excellent work. You never let me break your spirit, even when I was actively trying to toughen it. That kind of resilience is rare, Sarah Beth. It's exactly what I hoped you'd develop, and you had it all along. I set the folder down with shaking hands. I can't accept this. It's too much money. I don't understand any of this. You don't have to understand it right now, Kate said, standing up slowly. But you do have to accept it, because it's already done. Your mother needs to focus on recovery, not financial stress. Your family needs to heal, not file for bankruptcy. She moved toward the door, then turned back. Sarah Beth, when you're ready to return to work, I'd like to offer you a promotion. Senior Marketing Specialist, with a $12,000 salary increase and oversight of our digital marketing division. The position comes with one condition. You'll need to mentor junior staff members the way I should have mentored you, with challenge, yes, but also with support and complete transparency about your goals. I opened my mouth to respond, but she held up a hand. Don't answer now. Take all the time you need with your family. But know that everything I put you through, every difficult project and pointed question, was because I saw a future leader in you. I just went about developing that leadership in completely the wrong way. She paused at the doorway, her hand on the frame. My brother's accident taught me that life is fragile and unpredictable in ways we can never prepare for. The least we can do for each other is ease the burdens we have the power to ease. Your mother's medical bills were a burden I could lift. So I lifted it. Kate left, and I sat alone with my sleeping mother and a folder full of receipts that represented more money than my family had ever seen at once. I thought about the past 2 years, every frustrating interaction and professional setback, trying to reconcile the woman who'd just paid my family's crushing debt with the boss who'd seemed determined to derail my career and make my life miserable. When Mama woke up an hour later, I was still sitting there, staring at the payment confirmations like they might disappear if I looked away. Baby girl, she said weakly, using the nickname she'd called me since I was little. Why do you look like you've seen a ghost? I told her everything. About Kate's harsh treatment at work, about her brother Michael's accident, about the conversation we'd just had, and about the medical bills that were no longer hanging over our family like a sword about to fall. I showed her every receipt, every payment confirmation, trying to make sense of it all myself as I explained it to her. Mama listened quietly, occasionally asking for clarification but never interrupting my rambling explanation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, just holding my hand and thinking. This woman, she finally said, she sounds complicated. I laughed despite everything, because that was such a Mama thing to say. That's one way to put it. But Sarah Beth, Mama continued, squeezing my hand, people who have suffered often want to spare others the same suffering. Sometimes they go about it the wrong way, but the intention comes from a place of experience, not cruelty. It sounds like she was trying to prepare you for a hard world, even if her methods were harsh. I squeezed her hand back. I'm so angry at her, Mama. But I'm also grateful in a way that makes me feel guilty. I don't know how to hold both feelings at the same time. You don't have to choose one or the other, Mama said softly, her voice still weak but full of the wisdom that had guided our family my whole life. You can be angry about her methods and grateful for her help. You can acknowledge that she hurt you professionally while recognizing that she's saved our family financially. People are complicated, baby girl. The sooner you learn to hold complexity in your heart, the better you'll understand the world and the people in it. The next few weeks passed in a blur of recovery and reflection. Mama grew stronger each day, progressing from the ICU to a regular room to the cardiac rehabilitation program at the hospital. The financial stress that should have been crushing our family was simply absent. We could focus entirely on healing and being together. I took 2 weeks of family leave, spending my days at the hospital and my evenings researching Kate's background online. What I found was illuminating and complicated. She'd built a reputation as a demanding but highly effective manager who consistently developed top-tier talent. Her previous assistants and junior staff had gone on to leadership positions at major firms across Virginia and beyond. Industry articles praised her mentorship abilities and her commitment to pushing people beyond their comfort zones to achieve their potential. She wasn't a villain trying to destroy careers. She was a coach who'd forgotten to explain the training regimen to her players. I also learned more about her family's farm. The Henderson place had been growing tobacco and raising cattle in Washington County for over 150 years. The thought of them nearly losing it to medical debt made my chest tight with sympathy I hadn't expected to feel. When I returned to work at Blue Ridge Consulting, Kate was waiting with the formal promotion offer. We sat in her office, the same space where she'd gutted my Mountain View proposal, and had the most honest conversation of our professional relationship. I need you to understand something, I said, accepting the position but not letting her off the hook completely. What you did to me professionally was wrong. Your intentions might have been good, but your methods were harmful and unnecessarily cruel. I spent 2 years thinking I was failing, thinking I wasn't good enough, thinking you might fire me at any moment. Kate nodded seriously. You're absolutely right. I confused toughness with cruelty and challenge with undermining. I should have been transparent about my goals and supportive of your development process. I should have explained what I was doing and why. And the hospital bills, I continued, still struggling with the magnitude of her gesture. While I'm grateful beyond words, that level of intervention feels overwhelming. I'm not sure how to work for someone who's that involved in my personal life. The payment was a one-time action, Kate said firmly. It won't happen again, and I won't bring it up again unless you do. What happened with your mother transcended our professional relationship. It was about human decency, not workplace dynamics. Going forward, we need to rebuild our professional relationship on healthier, more transparent terms. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agendas. I found none, just genuine regret and determination to do better. Okay, I said finally. But if we're going to work together moving forward, it has to be as equals, not as mentor and student, and definitely not as savior and victim. I need to know that you respect my abilities and trust my judgment. Deal, Kate said, extending her hand across the desk. And Sarah Beth? I want you to know that your work on the Mountain View proposal was exactly the kind of innovative thinking this company needs to compete with larger firms. The next time you have an idea that bold, I want you to fight me on it. Don't let me or anyone else water down your vision without good reason. I shook her hand, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I was being seen as a professional equal rather than a subordinate to be molded. The promotion came with immediate challenges that excited rather than intimidated me. As senior marketing specialist, I was responsible for developing digital strategies for all major clients and mentoring 3 junior staff members, including Amy Johnson, a recent Virginia Tech graduate, and David Miller, who transferred from our accounting department. It was exactly the kind of responsibility I'd been craving, but it also meant working closely with Kate on a daily basis. The dynamic was completely different from before. Instead of undermining my ideas, she pushed me to refine them with constructive questions. Instead of pointing out flaws without offering solutions, she asked probing questions that helped me strengthen my proposals before presenting them to clients. Instead of excluding me from important meetings, she began including me in client calls and strategic planning sessions with the partners. It took time to trust the change. For months, I waited for the other shoe to drop, for her to revert to the harsh treatment I'd grown accustomed to. But it never happened. Kate had genuinely transformed her approach to management, and I began to see the leader she could have been all along if she'd combined her high standards with better communication. My mother's recovery progressed beautifully. 3 months after her surgery, she was back to light duties at Abingdon Elementary, where the other teachers and staff had rallied around our family with meal trains and offers of help. 6 months later, she'd completed cardiac rehabilitation and been cleared for normal activities. The financial stress that could have consumed our family's attention during her healing process had been eliminated, allowing us to focus entirely on her health and strengthening our relationships with each other. Jake was able to continue his studies at ETSU without worrying about taking on extra debt to help with medical bills. Emma could focus on her schoolwork and her goal of earning a scholarship. Daddy didn't have to consider selling his beloved fishing boat or taking on more debt against our house. The weight that had been lifted from our family was more than financial. It was emotional and spiritual too. The complexity of my feelings toward Kate evolved slowly over the months. Gratitude grew alongside professional respect. Anger faded into understanding, though it never disappeared completely. I began to see her not as the enemy who'd made my life difficult, but as a flawed mentor who'd ultimately changed the trajectory of my career and my family's life in ways I was still discovering. A year later, when I was promoted again to marketing director, Kate's former position, as she moved up to vice president of strategic development, I finally understood what she'd been trying to teach me. The challenges she'd presented, while poorly executed, had forced me to develop skills I wouldn't have cultivated in a more comfortable environment. I learned to defend my ideas under pressure, to think strategically about client needs, and to maintain confidence even when facing harsh criticism. More importantly, I learned how to mentor others without repeating her mistakes. My approach with junior staff focused on transparent communication, constructive feedback, and supportive challenge. I pushed Amy and David to excel while making sure they understood my expectations and felt valued throughout the process. When Amy proposed an ambitious social media campaign for the Washington County Tourism Board, I helped her refine it rather than shooting it down, and we won the account with her innovative approach. On my last day working directly under Kate before her promotion to VP, she stopped by my office with a small wrapped package. "A promotion gift," she said, setting it carefully on my desk. Inside was a framed photo of my mother taken during her recovery, smiling and strong in her hospital bed, surrounded by flowers from friends and coworkers. Kate had somehow gotten a copy from Emma, who'd been documenting Mama's progress on Instagram to keep extended family updated. The frame was engraved with a simple message: "Strength comes from surviving what you thought would break you." M.A. Henderson. I looked up at Kate, and this time when she smiled, I smiled back without reservation. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it for everything: the harsh lessons, the promotion, the medical bills, and the reminder that people can change and grow. "Thank you," she replied, "for becoming the leader I always saw in you, despite my worst efforts to develop it properly." 2 years later, Kate left Blue Ridge Consulting for a position as Chief Marketing Officer at a regional healthcare system based in Kingsport. Her farewell party was held at the Tavern in downtown Abingdon, attended by colleagues from throughout the firm and several former employees who'd moved on to other positions but still considered her a significant influence on their careers. During her farewell speech, Kate talked about the lessons she'd learned about leadership and mentorship during her time in Abingdon. She spoke about the importance of transparency, support, and creating environments where people could grow without fear. She never mentioned me specifically, but when she talked about learning to balance challenge with kindness, our eyes met across the crowded restaurant. After the formal speeches, she approached me near the dessert table where I was catching up with Jimmy Patterson, who'd been promoted to account manager. "Sarah Beth," she said, "I have something for you." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter of recommendation, but not for any specific position. It was simply a detailed account of my skills, accomplishments, and potential, written by someone who'd observed my professional development intimately and had clearly put considerable thought into documenting my strengths. "For whatever comes next," she said, "whether that's here at Blue Ridge or somewhere else entirely." I folded the letter carefully. "Kate, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you regret the way you handled things when you first arrived? If you could go back and do it all over again, would you do it differently?" She considered the question seriously, taking a sip of her wine before answering. I regret the methods, absolutely. I should have been more transparent about my goals and more supportive during the process. I should have explained what I was trying to accomplish and why I thought it was necessary. She paused. But Sarah Beth, I don't regret pushing you. You needed to be pushed beyond your comfort zone. I just wish I'd done it with more kindness and clarity. I nodded, understanding finally reaching complete clarity. For what it's worth, I think I needed exactly the manager you were, even if it was painful at the time. I just also needed the manager you became afterward. And I needed the employee who challenged me to become better, she replied. Thank you for not giving up on either of us, even when you had every reason to. As I watched Kate leave Blue Ridge Consulting for the last time, walking out into the cool mountain evening, I reflected on the strange and unexpected journey that had brought us from adversaries to allies. She'd entered my life as what felt like an enemy, someone determined to make my professional existence difficult and seemingly uninterested in my success or well-being. But the truth was far more complex than I could have imagined. Kate had been a teacher who'd forgotten to explain the curriculum, a mentor who'd confused toughness with harshness, and ultimately a person who'd used her own painful experiences to help another family avoid the same devastating suffering. The $78,247.63 she'd paid toward my mother's medical bills had saved my family from years of financial hardship that could have destroyed our stability and our dreams. But the professional challenges she'd presented, despite their poor execution, had prepared me for leadership in ways that comfort and constant praise never could have accomplished. I thought about my mother's words from that first night in the hospital. People are complicated, baby girl. The sooner you learn to hold complexity in your heart, the better you'll understand the world and the people in it. Kate Henderson had been my enemy until she wasn't. She'd been my obstacle until she became my opportunity. She'd been my tormentor until she revealed herself as my protector. In the end, she taught me the most valuable lesson of my career, that our understanding of people's motivations is often incomplete, that enemies can become allies when we see the full picture, and that the most meaningful help sometimes comes from the most unexpected sources. 6 months after Kate's departure, I received an email from her with a subject line that made me smile. Thought you'd want to see this. Attached was a news article from the Bristol Herald-Courier about Mountain View Resort. They'd hired a new marketing firm, the same one from Johnson City that had beaten us for their account using my original social media strategy. The campaign had been a massive success, bringing in younger visitors from Nashville, Charlotte, and Atlanta, exactly as I'd predicted it would. Kate's email contained just one line. Trust your instincts, Sarah Beth. They're better than you think they are. I printed the article and pinned it to my office bulletin board, right next to the framed photo of my mother. Both served as reminders of the same fundamental truth, that strength, support, and success often come from places we least expect, and that our worst moments can transform into our most meaningful ones if we're willing to embrace the full complexity of human nature. I never did find out exactly why Kate chose to pay my mother's medical bills. Was it guilt over her treatment of me? Genuine compassion from someone who'd faced similar circumstances with her own family? A strategic investment in retaining talent she valued despite her poor methods of developing it? Perhaps it was a combination of all these factors, woven together in ways that even she might not fully understand. The beautiful thing is that her motivations, while interesting to consider, ultimately don't matter as much as the impact of her actions. My mother recovered in an environment free from financial stress. My family avoided bankruptcy and the loss of our home. My career flourished under the challenge she provided, harsh as her methods were. Emma earned her scholarship to Virginia Tech, and Jake graduated debt-free from ETSU. And I learned that sometimes the people we think are working against us are actually working for us. They're just doing it in ways we don't recognize until much later, when we have the distance and perspective to see the fuller picture. Kate Henderson changed my life in ways both painful and profound. She was my enemy until she paid off my mother's hospital bill. But the truth is, she was never really my enemy at all. She was just a complicated person doing complicated things for complicated reasons, trying to help in the only way she knew how, shaped by her own experiences of struggle and loss. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. And sometimes, in the mountains of Southwest Virginia where I've lived my whole life, the people who challenge us the most are the ones who believe in us the most. They just have a hard time showing it in ways we can understand until the moment when everything becomes clear. 3 years passed, and my life settled into a rhythm I hadn't known I needed. I'd grown into my role as marketing director at Blue Ridge Consulting, overseeing a team of 6 specialists and managing accounts that stretched from the Tri-Cities to Charlottesville. The skills Kate had forced me to develop, resilience, strategic thinking, the ability to defend my ideas under pressure, had become second nature. But it was the unexpected phone call on a Tuesday morning in October that reminded me how intertwined our stories had become. Sarah Beth. The voice was Emma's, but she sounded different, older, more serious than the carefree college senior I'd dropped off at Virginia Tech just a few weeks earlier. I need to tell you something, and I need you to sit down. My heart immediately went to Mama and Daddy. What's wrong? Is everyone okay? It's not our family, Emma said quickly. It's Kate Henderson. Sarah Beth, she's been diagnosed with breast cancer. I felt the world tilt sideways. What? How do you know? Her niece Rebecca is in my sorority, Emma explained. She's been crying all week. The doctors found it during a routine screening, but it's already stage 3. She's starting chemotherapy next week. I sank into my office chair, staring out at the mountains that had watched over our valley for millions of years. Kate, with all her strength and sharp edges, facing something that could break anyone. Emma, I said slowly, do you have Rebecca's number? Within an hour, I was driving north on I-81 toward Kate's family farm in Washington County. Rebecca had given me directions and told me that Kate was staying with her parents while going through treatment, taking a leave of absence from her position in Kingsport. The Henderson farm was exactly what I'd imagined, rolling pastures dotted with cattle, a white farmhouse that looked like it had been standing since before the Civil War. And that particular kind of peace that comes from land that's been loved by the same family for generations. Kate was sitting on the front porch when I pulled up, wrapped in a quilt and looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Her hair was shorter than before, and she was thinner, but her eyes were still sharp and alert. Sarah Beth Williams, she said with a ghost of her old smile. What in the world are you doing here? I walked up the porch steps, suddenly unsure of myself. I heard about your diagnosis. I wanted to see how you're doing. She gestured to the empty chair beside her. Well, I'm sitting on my childhood porch being fussed over by my mother, who keeps bringing me sweet tea and cornbread like carbohydrates can cure cancer. So I'd say I'm doing about as well as can be expected. I sat down, and for a moment we just looked out at the pastures where a few cattle were grazing in the afternoon sun. How bad is it? I asked quietly. Bad enough, Kate said matter-of-factly. Good enough. The doctors say I have a fighting chance, which I suppose is better than no chance at all. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Kate turned to me with a curious expression. Sarah Beth, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you here? Really? I wasn't exactly kind to you for a long time. I thought about how to answer that. Because you changed my life. Not just with the hospital bills, though that was huge, but everything, the way you pushed me, the way you forced me to grow. I wouldn't be who I am now without that. Kate nodded slowly. Even the parts that hurt? Especially the parts that hurt. She smiled then, a real smile that reminded me of the person she'd become in those last months before leaving Blue Ridge. You know, going through this treatment, I've had a lot of time to think. About choices I've made, relationships I've damaged, things I wish I'd done differently. Any regrets? I asked. Plenty, she said. But not about pushing you. I regret how I did it, but not that I did it. You were meant for bigger things than being comfortable. Over the next few months, I found myself making the drive to Washington County regularly. Sometimes I brought work, marketing materials for Kate to review or industry articles I thought she'd find interesting. Sometimes I brought food from Mama, who insisted that anyone fighting cancer needed proper nutrition. Most of the time, I just brought myself. Kate was going through a brutal round of chemotherapy, but she faced it with the same determination she'd brought to everything else in her life. She lost her hair, lost weight, had days when she could barely get out of bed. But she never lost her sharp wit or her ability to cut straight to the heart of any problem. During one visit in December, when the mountains were dusted with snow and the world felt quiet and still, Kate brought up something I hadn't expected. Sarah Beth, she said, I need to ask you for a favor. Anything. She pulled out a manila envelope, similar to the one she'd given me years earlier at the hospital. If something happens to me, and I know it might, I want you to have this. Inside were business cards, contact information, and detailed notes about every major client Kate had worked with during her career. It was like a roadmap of the business world she'd navigated for over a decade. These are the people who matter, she said. The ones who can open doors, who can help you build something bigger than Blue Ridge Consulting if that's what you want to do someday. I stared at the papers, understanding the magnitude of what she was offering. Kate, you're going to beat this. You're going to be fine. Maybe, she said. But if I don't, I want to know that what I learned gets passed on to someone who will use it well. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came news that Kate's treatment was working. The tumors were shrinking, her energy was returning, and her doctors were cautiously optimistic. By summer, she was declared in remission and ready to return to work. But instead of going back to Kingsport, Kate made a decision that surprised everyone. She started her own consulting firm, Henderson Strategic Solutions, focusing on helping small businesses in rural communities develop modern marketing strategies. I realized, she told me over lunch at the tavern, looking healthier than she had in months, that I was spending my time helping big companies get bigger. But the real challenge, the real need, is in places like this, helping family businesses and local organizations compete in a global marketplace. Her first major client was Mountain View Resort, the account I'd lost years earlier. Their social media campaign with the Johnson City firm had been successful for a while, but they needed a more comprehensive strategy. Kate brought them exactly what they needed, incorporating many of the ideas from my original proposal. I want to offer you a position, she said during that lunch. Senior partner at Henderson Strategic. Equal equity, shared decision-making, the whole thing. I was flattered but confused. Kate, I have a good thing going at Blue Ridge. Why would I leave? Because you're ready for something bigger, she said. Because together we could build something that matters, something that helps our community grow and thrive. She leaned forward, her eyes bright with the kind of vision I learned to recognize and respect. Sarah Beth, you understand this market better than anyone I know. You grew up here, you know these people, you understand what they need. I have the experience and the connections. Together, we could create something really special. It took me 2 weeks to make the decision, 2 weeks of long conversations with Mama and Daddy, with Jake and Emma, with Nathan Douglas, the man I'd been dating for the past year who understood my connection to this place and these people. In the end, it came down to a simple truth. Kate was right. I was ready for something bigger. Henderson Strategic Solutions officially launched in September, operating out of a renovated Victorian house on Main Street in Abingdon. Our first year exceeded every expectation we'd set. We helped a dozen local businesses develop online presence, assisted 2 regional nonprofits with fundraising campaigns, and even worked with the town of Damascus to promote their status as Trail Town USA. But the project I was most proud of was one we took on pro bono, helping Abingdon Elementary School, where Mama still worked, develop a digital fundraising strategy for their new playground equipment. The campaign raised $50,000 in 6 months, enough to build the kind of playground that would serve the community for decades. One evening, as Kate and I were reviewing quarterly reports in our office, she looked up from her laptop with a thoughtful expression. Sarah Beth, she said, do you ever think about how different things might have been if we'd started off as allies instead of whatever we were? I considered the question seriously. Honestly, I think we needed to go through what we went through. The struggle, the misunderstanding, even the conflict, it all led us here. If you'd been supportive and encouraging from the beginning, I might not have developed the strength I needed to be your partner now. Kate nodded slowly. That's very wise. And probably true. Besides, I added with a smile, where's the fun in a story that starts with everything being easy? We worked late that night, planning strategies for new clients and dreaming about expanding our reach across Southwest Virginia and East Tennessee. Outside our windows, the lights of Abingdon twinkled like stars, and I thought about all the paths that had led me to this moment. My mother's heart attack, Kate's harsh mentorship, the crushing weight of medical debt, the unexpected salvation, the slow build of understanding and respect, Kate's cancer diagnosis, her recovery, and now, this partnership that felt both surprising and inevitable. 2 years later, Henderson Strategic Solutions had grown to 12 employees and had helped launch successful campaigns for over 100 local businesses. We've been featured in Virginia Business Magazine and had been invited to speak at conferences across the Southeast. But the moment that meant the most to me came during Abingdon's annual Fall Festival, when I was walking through the vendor booths with Nathan, now my fiancé, and we stopped at the Abingdon Elementary School booth. There, playing on the new playground equipment our fundraising campaign had made possible, were dozens of children whose parents worked at businesses we'd helped grow. The Hartwell family's new restaurant, the Pattersons' expanded hardware store, the Miller's Boutique Hotel that had become a destination for visitors exploring the Virginia Creeper Trail. It was a web of connection and community that stretched back to that terrible night in the hospital when I thought my world was falling apart. Proud of yourself? Nathan asked, following my gaze to the playground. Proud of all of it, I said. The whole messy, complicated, beautiful story. Kate appeared beside us, holding a funnel cake and looking completely relaxed in jeans and a Virginia Tech sweatshirt. Sarah Beth, she said, I just got off the phone with a client in Bristol. They want to recommend us to 3 other businesses in their network. That's great, I said. Which client? She grinned. Mountain View Resort. Apparently, their latest campaign exceeded all expectations. We all laughed, and I thought about the strange circle that had brought us back to where we started, but with completely different understanding and completely different roles. As the sun set over the Blue Ridge Mountains that had watched over our valley for so long, I realized that the best stories aren't the ones where everything goes smoothly from beginning to end. The best stories are the ones where people hurt each other and help each other, where enemies become allies, where crisis becomes opportunity, and where the ending is better than anyone could have imagined at the beginning. Kate Henderson had been my enemy until she paid off my mother's hospital bill. But the truth was more complex and more beautiful than that simple statement could capture. She had been my teacher, my challenger, my protector, my partner, and ultimately, my friend. And in the mountains of Southwest Virginia, where I lived my whole life and where I planned to build my future, that was more than enough. That was everything. Thanks for listening to this powerful story of unexpected allies and the complexity of human relationships. If you found it moving or relatable, don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear about times when you discovered that someone you thought was working against you was actually helping you grow. Subscribe for more stories about the surprising ways people change our lives for the better. See you in the next story.